morning. Welcome to this special proceeding focusing on the New Orleans Police Department consent decree. In an effort to make our hearings more accessible to the general public and to share NOPD's progress with a broader audience, we're holding this proceeding at the beautiful Loyola University School of Law. Thank you, Dean Landers and President Tetlow, for welcoming us here and for providing this beautiful venue. I want to welcome all of you here today, members of the community, elected officials, representatives of many organizations that have contributed to the success of the NOPD, Loyola Law School students and faculty, and last but not least, the media. A special welcome and thank you to members of the New Orleans City Council for the support and encouragement that you have given us. Also, a special thank you to the Lens for live streaming this important event so that even more members of our community will be able to see it. While we're not in my courtroom, and as you can see, I'm not wearing my usual judicial robe, I intend to run this proceeding similar to the way I run our quarterly public hearings. I'll start by asking the parties to introduce themselves. I'll follow that with some introductory remarks of my own, and then we'll hear from the monitoring team, the United States Department of Justice, and the NOPD. I will not entertain public comments or questions today. However, the monitoring team will hold a public meeting next month on Tuesday, February 19th at 6:30 p.m. at the Ashe Cultural Arts Center, at which the public and the press will be welcome to make comments and ask questions. So let's begin. Will the parties please identify themselves? First, the city and the New Orleans Police Department.
Good morning, Your Honor. Sunny LaBeouf, City Attorney, on behalf of the City of New Orleans.
Good morning, Your Honor. Chief Sean Ferguson on behalf of the New Orleans Police Department.
Good morning, Your Honor. Deputy Superintendent Danny Murphy over the Compliance Bureau for NOPD.
And now the monitoring team.
Good morning, Your Honor. Jonathan Aroney, the lead monitor.
Good morning, Your Honor. David Douglas, Deputy Monitor.
And you? Oh, very good.
Bob McGill, Monitor.
And the Department of Justice.
Good morning, Your Honor. Jude Bullock for the United States.
Thank you all. I would also like for other members of the New Orleans Police Department who are here today to stand to be recognized. As most of you know, prior to 2011, the New Orleans Police Department was a broken department. According to the Department of Justice, basic elements of effective policing, clear policies, training, accountability, and confidence of the citizenry had been absent for years. The DOJ found that the NOPD engaged in patterns of misconduct that violated the Constitution and federal law. It was against this background that the city and DOJ filed a joint motion to approve a binding consent decree in 2012. After hearing from the public and the parties, I signed an order approving the consent decree and making it an order of the court in early 2013. I remind us of this history not to dwell on the past, but because it highlights how remarkable the department's transition has been. As the monitoring team has reported publicly over the past several years, and as they report to me in chambers on a monthly basis, the New Orleans Police Department has made significant progress in every area of the consent decree. While this does not mean our job is finished, it is a noteworthy achievement. Accordingly, I've asked the monitoring team in the Department of Justice to provide us today with a detailed accounting of the specific areas in which they believe the department has achieved full and effective compliance with the consent decree, and to identify those areas where more work is necessary to achieve that goal. While NOPD's journey is not yet complete, its progress to date has already brought with it significant rewards. I'd like to share with you a slide that I put together so that I can talk about the dividends of the NOPD's transformation, because it extends well beyond those outlined in the four corners of the consent decree. NOPD's efforts have brought about significant collateral benefits as well, and I want to share a few of my thoughts with you about that. The first one is community trust. I believe that the entry of the consent decree order and the work the department has done has increased community satisfaction with the police department. The monitoring team conducts a comprehensive door-to-door survey of the residents of New Orleans every 2 years. The team's 2016 survey showed a significant improvement in satisfaction with the performance of the police department. A recent survey by the Metropolitan Crime Commission showed a similar positive trend. The monitoring team has just completed its third biennial survey, and we expect to see even more improvement when the results from that survey are released in the near future. A second area where the city has seen benefits from the enaction of the consent decree is in constitutional policing. Residents of and visitors to New Orleans no longer fear the police department, as many did prior to execution of the consent decree. Uses of excessive force, canine deployments, and other problematic events have been reduced substantially, and the monitoring team will provide you details on those topics. Another thing that we've accomplished as a result of the consent decree and the hard work of the NOPD and its officers is burden reduction. Policing takes a lot of time of the officers and their supervisors. Without sufficient personnel, a police agency cannot fight crime, let alone undertake massive reform efforts. Unfortunately, NOPD is competing against police departments nationwide with a small pool of highly talented recruits. To offset the reduction in the number of officers we have here in New Orleans, the department has worked closely with the monitoring team to provide time-saving innovations and efficiencies. These efforts have freed up personnel to fight crime and answer calls for service. I'd like to go to my next slide. Many of you may not know that there are actually many of the sections of the consent decree require enough police officers and supervisors for the city to come into compliance with the consent decree. And I've listed those sections here. I'd like to go to my next slide. These are some examples of projects that have been completed during the period of the consent decree that have allowed the NOPD to comply with the consent decree and to also increase their crime fighting and reduce the time in which they respond to calls. We've become much more electronic with the e-citation system. The e-gavel warrant system allows police officers in their car to electronically communicate with the magistrate judges who have to sign search warrants and arrest warrants, so they don't have to drive around for hours, find the judicial officer to sign, then go back and then execute the warrant. They can do it all from the car. And this is a major innovation, and it saved so much time. I think that's one of the things that the police officers like the best. The city is working on traffic accident investigations to find ways to respond to what we would call fender benders without having to deploy uniformed officers to the scene. We're giving gas cards to officers. They were having to drive miles and for an hour to get to a gas station that was authorized to fill up their vehicle. And now some of them have gas cards so they don't have to drive back and forth across the river, and that's also time saving. You all know about the false alarm ordinance. There are many businesses that were they had repeated false alarms, and a police officer would have to respond to each one of those, sometimes thousands of times to the same business. Well, now, if that happens, the businesses are fined, and if it happens repeatedly, the police stop responding. We've done a lot of duplication of efforts. Officers were having to write the same thing 3 times on 3 different forms. If you can imagine how frustrating that would be. And we've done some things to reduce that, and we're still working to reach our maximum capacity on that. We put computers in the jail so that while officers are there waiting with people who are being booked into the jail, they have a computer access. ADD is officers who are not at work because of an injury or offer on the job. And of course, some officers have legitimate reasons they can't be at work. But we're looking at that to make sure that the system is not being abused, so that people get back to work as soon as they can, because we need those officers on the field. We have a more efficient alternative reporting system, which is either by telephone or online. And we've hired administrative assistants to take some of the burdens off of can be done by people who, that don't need to be done by sworn officers. So I'm gonna go back to my first slide. Another area in which the NOPD has benefited from the consent decree is its national recognition. Prior to the start of this journey, one would be hard pressed to identify any reputable police department that wanted to come to New Orleans to learn how to police from the NOPD. Now our city is regularly visited by police departments from across the country, eager to learn from the NOPD. We've had officers from Baltimore, Chicago, New York, Washington D.C., the U.S. Virgin Islands, Honolulu, and many more, all looking to share experiences with and learn from the NOPD. The stunning improvement in the department's national reputation has been reflected in the media as well. The department's achievements have been reported extensively in the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, the New York Times, Police Chief Magazine, Just South Quarterly, Police Quarterly, and many others. I encourage all of you to read an excellent article that was in the Washington Post yesterday about our one-of-a-kind peer intervention program in New Orleans called EPIC, Ethical Policing is Courageous. I'm sure you'll be very proud of your department if you read about it. Another area where we've made significant improvements is in recruiting. In the past, NOPD found out the hard way it's difficult to recruit candidates into a dysfunctional organization. In 2010, NOPD employed about 1,441 sworn officers. By 2014, that number had dwindled to 1,145. Since that time, as the department has worked to restore its tarnished national image, the number of sworn officers has risen steadily to 1,168 in 2016, 1,189 in 2017, and 1,219 in 2018, and we expect more growth during 2019. At the same time, the department's efforts have resulted in lower attrition rates. I'm confident these trends reflect not only the department's renewed focus on recruitment, but also its renewed image in the local and national policing community. I also think some of NOPD's recent recruitment success is due to NOPD officers and leadership routinely traveling outside New Orleans to serve as ambassadors for the department and thought leaders at some of the country's most important policing events. For example, Superintendent Harrison is on the board of the major City Chiefs Association, and he speaks across the country on a wide variety of policing topics. Deputy Chief Noel, who's here with us today, has presented to the American Prosecutors Association and many other groups. Both Superintendent Harrison and Deputy Chief Noel have addressed the International Association of Chiefs of Police on several occasions. Deputy Chief Thomas has presented nationally on topics of police reform and other topics. Deputy Chief Murphy has shared the department's technological innovations with multiple police agencies across the country, and I can tell you they're all very impressed with Deputy Chief Murphy and the programs that he's put into place here. And there are many other examples. Another area where we've seen improvement is officer satisfaction. As the community's perception of the NOPD has improved over the years, so has the perception of police officers themselves. I hear regularly from our officers that pride in wearing the uniform of the NOPD has been restored. We'll all be hearing more about this when the monitoring team releases its biennial survey results in the next month or two. Another important area is innovation. Troubled agencies spend little time innovating. Indeed, I venture to say that most troubled agencies are quite content with the way things being the way they always have been, and that may be why they're troubled. New Orleans was that department when we began our journey. But now NOPD is a leader in innovation. NOPD is the first department in the country to partner with the Innocence Project to teach investigative techniques to homicide detectives. NOPD has established an extremely effective use of force review board. NOPD has put into place a proactive critical incident video release policy. NOPD has developed an effective data management program called MAX and created what probably is the most open data sharing environment in the country. And these are all innovative programs developed and implemented by the NOPD. This is an incomplete list of all the ways I think that New Orleans has been improved by the consent decree, but I hope it makes my point. Constitutional policing brings with it a host of benefits beyond the most obvious benefit of all, protecting the constitutional rights of those the police department is sworn to protect. Another reason I began my remarks with a short discussion of the pre-2013 history of the NOPD, in addition to providing a stark contrast to the current state of affairs, is to remind us all where the NOPD could return if the current journey does not continue. While I hold NOPD's current leadership team and our city's leadership team in very high regard, and their actions over the past 3 years have earned them my deep respect, as we all know, police leaders and city leaders come and go. We obviously can't count on these particular forward-thinking individuals always being at the helm. Consequently, the parties, the monitoring team, and I have focused intently on ensuring the progress that has been made today endures. Until we know the reforms will be sustained, our work is incomplete. On that topic, I'm often asked when the department will have fully implemented the consent decree and federal judicial involvement will end. Well, paragraph 491 of the consent decree provides that the city and the United States may petition the court once the city has been in full and effective compliance with the consent decree for 2 years. For convenience, I'll refer to this 2-year period as the sustainment period. To move into this sustainment period and thus begin the 2-year clock, the NOPD must demonstrate full and effective compliance with every section of the consent decree. The monitoring team measures full and effective compliance on a section-by-section basis. While compliance with one consent decree section or another brings with it significant benefits to the city, for example, in terms of reduced need for external monitoring, the 2-year sustainment clock begins to click only when the department is in full and effective compliance with the entire consent decree. As we will hear today, the NOPD has made substantial progress towards that goal. Paragraph 456 of the consent decree directs the monitoring team to conduct a comprehensive assessment of the consent decree. Paragraph 456 directs that this assessment address areas of greatest achievement and the requirements that appear to have contributed to this success, as well as areas of greatest concern, including strategies for accelerating full and effective compliance. In accordance with paragraph 456, I asked the monitoring team to share with us today its specific findings in each of the sections of the consent decree in or nearing full and effective compliance, and also to comment on those areas needing additional work. While, as I said, many of these findings have been shared with the public through our frequent public reports and my quarterly status conferences, we've not yet had the chance to discuss them all together in assessing the department's progress toward achieving full and effective compliance as a whole. So at this time, I'd like to ask the Jonathan Aroney, our lead monitor, and deputy lead monitor, David Douglas, to come forward and make a presentation. And they will be followed by presentations by representatives of the New Orleans Police Department and the United States Department of Justice.
Thank you,
Bear with us 1 second so we can change some slides around here. My wife yells at me that I look very old when I wear my glasses this way, but it's the only way I can see what's in front of me and see you all. So if anyone sees my wife, just tell her I didn't do this. Your Honor, thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. This is such a great turnout. Thank you to Loyola for having us here. This is part of our effort to make what we do and what NOPD does more accessible to more people. Thank you for the media for covering this, for live streaming this, and the city officials who came as well. Thank you so much. So I'm Jonathan. I'm the lead of the monitoring team. This is David. David's the deputy monitor. In truth, we are co-leaders of the monitoring team. We have been in this from the beginning. We will be in this till the end. And we are here to walk you through a summary of our findings. This session is different from most of our sessions because usually in court we're doing one of two things. We are either giving a deep dive focus into one specific area, like we've reported on recruitment, or we've reported on uses of force, or we've reported on the successes of the sexual assault and domestic violence team. Or in court, we could give a very, very general overview. But we're in a position now where we can be much more specific and detailed in the various areas of NOPD compliance. So that's what we're going to do today. And as the judge said, remember, this is not an opportunity for a back and forth discussion. This is just an opportunity for us to present. However, in February, we will be having another one of our community meetings at the Ashley Cultural Center, and that's an opportunity for the public to talk and ask questions and get answers. We've done that many times before, and we'll be doing that again. Actually, I think it's the 19th, right? February 19th. Okay. Now, if I remember what I did with my little clicker here. So let's just start with a brief kind of understanding of the terminology we use here. So this is the key definition that we use: full and effective compliance. That's the definition from the consent decree. That's the standard against which we measure NOPD's accomplishments. And remember, this is so important because once you're in full and effective compliance with all the sections of the consent decree, that's when the city enters the sustainment period. As the consent decree says, it's the city's burden to prove to the monitoring team and to the court that the city is, in fact, in full and effective compliance. So you'll hear this term many times today as we go through the findings. With that as background, this is the path to compliance. I can't say it's an easy path. It is a straightforward path. The police department implements the reforms required by the consent decree. The monitoring team conducts audits and evaluations and reviews and meets with people and meets with officers, and ultimately conducts section-by-section assessments in partnership with the Department of Justice. And we identify the areas that are in full and effective compliance. Once the court finds, now remember, the monitoring team recommends, the court actually finds. Once the court finds that the department's in full and effective compliance with all the areas, the department enters into the sustainment period that Her Honor talked about. And then NOPD has the obligation to maintain that full and effective compliance for that two-year period. So that's the path that we're on. Judge Morgan mentioned a little bit about why we're here today, and her request that we look at this paragraph 456 comprehensive assessment. What's important about this is, for the longest time, we were unable to provide an assessment. When we started this, as DOJ found, every element of the police department was broken. The DOJ findings letter walks through step by step kind of the state of affairs that we found ourselves when we started this. So at the beginning, and even the first couple of years, it made no sense to spend time and resources on a reassessment, only to reaffirm the fact that, yes, it was still broken. In fact, when we started, the department wasn't even keeping data in a way that we could conduct an assessment. So we're very pleased to say that we are now in a position where the institutions are in so much better shape. The data are so much more credible. The systems are there that we can now conduct this sort of assessment. And this assessment formed the basis of the report, which we filed with the court yesterday, and serves for the basis of our overview here today as well. So I don't bury the lead. A brief executive summary of what we're going to be talking about over the next 25 minutes or so. As you've heard me say, anyone who's come to the court hearings before has heard me say this, the police department continues to make significant progress in every area of the consent decree. And that's very big news. There is not any area, even the areas that are harder and take longer, where progress is not being made. Multiple areas, as you'll hear David and I talk about today, have already achieved full and effective compliance, and we'll have a list of those for you in a moment. You'll hear me say this again, you've heard me say it before, but the NOPD leadership team deserves significant credit for what it has done. Okay? We could not have done it without NOPD's leadership team and the men and women of the police department. I like to think they could not have done it without us. But it's this partnership with the Department of Justice, the court, NOPD, the city, and the monitoring team that has allowed us to go forward. And you already recognize a lot of NOPD leaders here today. I personally applaud them for taking this so seriously and caring so much about the future of the department. Obviously, their continued focus on this is going to be critical to get the department to the finish line. I've known Sean Ferguson for a while. I have no doubt about his continued commitment to this, and so I'm thrilled, Superintendent, to have you on board. Now, as you'll also hear, some of the consent decree paragraphs still require additional work. And some of these areas are significant. These are important things that are very complicated, hard to get done, and that need to get done. But David and I and our whole team have no doubt that this progress will continue, and it is clear that progress has been made even in these areas, and we'll get to that in a minute. So here's what we're going to be doing today. I won't linger on this, rather, in fact, I will just get to what it is we're doing. Very briefly, most of you know this, but just for a little level setting, remember the breadth and scope of the consent decree. This at least then was the most comprehensive far-reaching consent decree in the country. If not now, it's at least in the top two, I would say. All these areas are covered by the consent decree. All these areas had elements of dysfunction in the department prior to the consent decree. And so our team in NOPD has been working to solve every one of these problems at the same time. Now what that means is sometimes one problem has to wait for the solution of another problem first, because some of these build upon other things. But this is the scope of the project that we all started. Now it's also useful to have a little sense of the history of what we've been doing here. So this is an abbreviated timeline, and the reason I think this is important is because the city got off to a slow start. Right? At the beginning of the consent decree, the city and the department were not as committed as they are now. And if you look at this timeline, you'll see that really when the current leadership team got in place and the infrastructure started to get in place, that's when the city's performance really started to move forward with great speed. So even though DOJ conducted its investigation, I think in 2011, and the court approved the consent decree in 2013, progress didn't really start to move forward until 2014, 2015. And that's important background to keep in mind. So I have 3 slides here that I suspect is probably what you're all waiting to hear, because it summarizes the various areas that the department is in full and effective compliance. This is just a brief slide that explains how we define the various states of progress. From no meaningful progress, which is in red for a reason, that's obviously really, really bad news, to full and effective compliance, which is where we want everything to be, because once we're all there, starts the sustainment period. When we started, we even have that slide. When we started, everything was in the red. And it shouldn't surprise anybody that it's in the red because it was in the Department of Justice's investigation. So this is what the picture looked like when we started this, this project. And this is what the picture looks like now. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because David and I are going to walk through the various elements, but I just do want to explain some highlights of this chart. And I think most of them are obvious. First of all, there is nothing in the red. Okay? There is no area of the consent decree that NOPD has not made meaningful progress. Importantly, there is nothing in the yellow. In other words, they are making what we would expect a city serious about compliance to make that sort of progress in all the areas of the consent decree. The blue, the green, and the green, I think of as that's all the good news. Like those are the good news buckets, and obviously the green and the green are the especially good news bucket. But as you'll hear when we talk today, I can't stress this enough. being in the blue, as we say, the significant progress bucket is not a negative finding. Okay? That is a positive finding. There is very real progress being made. Those are very complicated areas. They have taken some cities years and years to figure out. And so even in those areas, as we'll talk about, the city continues to make the progress that we would hope and expect of a city. So we're gonna walk through the light greens and the dark greens, and we're also gonna highlight some of the areas where things are still in blue. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna ask David to come up, and I hope it doesn't hurt your views, but we're probably gonna share the podium here, because we're gonna go a little bit back and forth. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start with use of force. I think that's sort of one of the driving concerns underlying this, and perhaps in many ways, sort of the most public, the area in which the public's most concerned and touched. I won't read the paragraph, but generally the purpose of the consent decree is to ensure that the New Orleans Police Department engages in constitutional policing and uses force in ways that is both constitutional and appropriately restrained and yet effective. So in working with the department over these last several years, the way we go about it, we've been embedded, our team has been embedded with the department. We review every serious use of force. We routinely take samples of the less serious uses of force. Standards and levels of force, levels of seriousness are set forth in the consent decree, and we track those closely. In terms of the reforms that need to be made, the first thing is structural, and you'll see here under the reform highlights box, the first thing you have to do is you have to have the right policies. You have to have policies that give clear guidance and let officers know what's expected from them, how they're supposed to approach their job, and how they'll be held accountable. And we've spent a long time working closely with the department to revise its policies to ensure that they accomplish just that, not just in this area, but really in all areas of the consent decree. From those clear policies with clear standards and guidance, that allows you to do the training necessary to ensure that officers know what is expected of them and to ensure that they do it when confronted with a situation. And so we are very pleased with the policies that have been created, as well as the training that is performed in accordance with those policies. I'll talk more about the use of force review board and the FIT team, but those are important mechanisms so that each use of force gets judged impartially, thoroughly, according to clear standards, and when there are violations, there's appropriate response. And so what we have found in this area, and all of this is in our report, I should say, at greater detail. But first, one of the real keys to success here, one of the benefits, has been the use of the body-worn cameras. Obviously, body-worn cameras provide invaluable insight into what happens in an encounter, but the key is they have to be turned on. And as you can expect, when the program was new, we found lots of instances of non-compliance, but now we see that in the main there's high compliance with the policy regarding use of body-worn camera, and that provides tremendous data for us. We see, I can't read the slide from here. We see that all use of force incidents that are required to be reviewed by the force investigative team are reviewed, and we find that any violations are handled appropriately by discipline or corrective action as appropriate. NOPD is committed to continuing to ensure that they have a robust use of force review board, continue to review and update policies as necessary, and to continue to coordinate with the independent police monitor, which plays an important oversight role as well. I'm going to get to the data because the power of the story really is in the numbers. And here is the trend of what we've seen for officer-involved shootings from 2012 to 2018. You'll see the numbers go exactly where we want them to go, from 9 in 2012 down to 0 in 2018. But of course, the trend is consistently downward all the way. Now, obviously, we don't expect the 0. That's not the standard we expect to be maintained. It's not what we expect to be maintained. What we want to ensure, though, is that we know all the facts about each use of force, that it's within policy, and that If it isn't, it's appropriately dealt with, and that's what we will be looking the NOPD to do as we go forward. Animals, a reduction of shootings, and there are a few accidental shootings each year as well. We work, the force investigation team investigates use of force after the fact. It's important that they do their job thoroughly, that their findings are supported by evidence, and we are finding consistently since 2015, 100% of their findings are supported by the evidence. The Use of Force Review Board. So essentially, the Use of Force Review Board is an oversight and quality control unit that also reviews serious uses of force, largely to see if lessons can be learned so that they're not repeated in the future. If they see gaps or weaknesses in the investigation, they address that. But it really is an important mechanism to ensure that the department continues to learn from mistakes that may have been made and to make changes, and they feed some of those lessons into the academy so that it can be used to train new recruits. We are very impressed with what we've seen in the Use of Force Review Team. The discussions are candid, the discussions are robust, and they really have served their purpose of making a better department. Canine bites. This is one of the big successes in the findings letter. The Department of Justice found that the canine unit was so dysfunctional that the canines were biting the handlers, and in fact, the unit was shut down. But now what we're seeing, we have a steady decrease in the number of deployments. The key here, however, is that in 2018 and 2017, we had no bites and no off-lead deployments. So there's been tremendous leadership in this section that has really brought us to date, and it's a unit that's working very well. Vehicle pursuits, there are always going to be vehicle pursuits, but the policy's been tightened up. Vehicle pursuits are authorized only in the case of a violent crime. I believe in 2018, we only had one vehicle pursuit that was out of policy. And you'll see here, I don't want to spend a lot of time with this slide, but one benefit to a better vehicle pursuit policy is fewer accidents and less property damage, which costs the city money and takes units out of service. So, so overall, the numbers for use of force are all going in the right way, and they're going in the right way for the right reasons, namely because the appropriate structures are in place to provide the necessary guidance and accountability, and we are very impressed with the results. Jonathan, you want to add anything on that?
The only quick thing I'll add on the Use of Force Review Board is just a brief anecdote which highlighted early on the seriousness of NOPD leadership. And one of the early Use of Force Review Boards, there was a member of rank in the meeting, maybe a commander or a lieutenant or somebody, and the person felt a little uncomfortable, and the person said, wait a minute, this seems wrong, we're Monday morning quarterbacking. And the deputy chief in charge or leading this meeting stood right up and said, yes, that's exactly what we're doing. That is our job. That's what we need to do. And he was very serious about that comment. And we look very closely to make sure the Use of Force Review Board is not kind of sweeping things under the rug. And as David said, we have been very pleased at the seriousness, honesty, robustness of those discussions. So let's move, as I said, David and I will do a little tag team here. Let's move to crisis intervention team, which frankly was, NOPD had a lot of early successes in this area. CIT is very, very important for a couple of reasons. Okay, one, it's obviously important to citizens, community members in mental health crisis who need a knowledgeable person coming to their aid so encounters with those people don't end in a police use of force. But they're also equally important to the police officers who are at risk when they encounter people in mental health crisis as well. And this, I gotta admit, this program is so enjoyable to talk about because the NOPD officers are so proud of their accomplishments here. The NOPD officers who are CIT trained wear their pin very, very proudly. And when we're talking to officers, as we do all the time, as certainly every police officer here knows, we don't monitor from a desk. We are out there in the field. And when we talk to police officers, they speak about the CIT expertise with pride. Like, we might be at a scene and they're very quick to say, oh, let Mary needs to handle this, she's CIT trained. And so this has really worked very, very well. So here are some of our highlights. Very early on, under the leadership, frankly, of Danny Murphy and others, the department implemented a proven model for CIT. Our team was impressed with it. They had a very good structure to get the CIT program set up. The training very early on was very good training. We watched the training. We provided some guidance as they moved out with the training. And we have seen the training has been effective. As I said, officers are very proud of their successes here, and rightly so. One key thing that's worth hitting here is this is one of many examples where the department has gone above and beyond the requirements of the consent decree. So the consent decree, I believe, calls for 20% training in this area. The department has moved up to 37, and even that's not enough. They're continuing to try to get to 40% of the officers trained. And actually, I wouldn't surprise me at all. I think the city and department would love to have every officer trained in this. And so it's just a great example of a success, but not being satisfied enough with the success. Some of these slides are in our report, so you can look at them there. Just want to highlight the trend. It's the right trend we want to see. Officers continue to be trained in CIT. They continue to want to be trained in CIT. And importantly, once we were comfortable that the officers were being trained, we then had to refocus our efforts to make sure the officers were being deployed. Right? Is the city getting the CIT officers to the scenes that need a CIT officer? That takes a little bit longer, but even if you look there, we see a great trend. And thanks to the communications district, actually, and I think the director of the communications district is here somewhere, they have done a great job working with the department to make the deployment of CIT officers more efficient and effective. And that's why I think we're seeing that upward trend there. There's more on CIT in our report, as I said. I want to hit two other ones relatively quickly, and then I'll probably tag it back over to David. So I want to talk about these next two areas, custodial interrogations and photographic lineups. Both were significant problems identified by the Department of Justice in its report. Though custodial interrogations, we all kind of have this image of what this is because we've all seen TV shows and movies where someone's brought into the interrogation room in the white light and the door's closed and no one knows what's happened in there. And I'm very happy to say that does not happen in New Orleans. This was a difficult one to fix, frankly, for the police department. And not because, frankly, there were a lot of officers, frankly, beating up people in the interrogation room. What was really hard for the department was the technology aspects, the record-keeping aspects. And if there aren't records kept, if there aren't videos, then in our view, you don't get credit for anything. We do not know what goes on in the room if we don't see those protections in place. So through the hard work of a member of our monitoring team, Chief McNeely, and other people on our team, and the hard work of the department, even though it was a slow start, they made great progress. The policy is strong, the training is strong, the practice is strong. We still conduct regular audits. They're doing a great job in all the audits. The interrogations are being recorded and logged. We do not see problems in the interrogation room, and they're maintaining those logs. This is what the picture looked like in 2014. Hey, N is not good, by the way. Hey, N is bad. And remember, this is only 2014, not that long ago. And this is what the picture looked like the last couple times we conducted our audit. To be clear, C is good. Okay? So this highlights the great progress we've seen in this area. Now, a similar story with respect to photographic lineups. And again, to make sense of this to everybody, because you've all seen this on TV shows and movies as well, the quintessential thing you worry about in a photographic lineup is an officer that shows pictures of someone to a witness and says, tell me who the bad guy is, and then points at the bad guy. Like that's kind of what you see in the movies happens. Or, okay, tell me who the bad guy is, and it's 4 white people and 1 black person, right? Or 4 people with my kind of haircut and and 1 person with Danny's young, robust haircut. So that's, I mean, to put it simply, that's what we're looking at there. And here again, it took the department a while to move into compliance in this area. The big contributor to that was the lack of records, the lack of technology. But here again, our audits show they've done a great job now. They have a strong process, strong policy, strong training, and most importantly, we care about the results. We look at the results and we do not see the violations that we used to see. So here again is the picture. This is only in 2014, not that long ago. As we said, and's not so good. And then in our audit, more recent audits, we see compliance across the board in this area. So very proud of the achievements made in these two very important areas. The last one I'm going to hit before I tag out, I think, is I think one of the biggest achievements for the department, but it's also an achievement that came through a lot of pain. Okay, we divide policing free of gender bias into two areas: sexual assault response and investigations, and domestic violence response and investigations. Now, we're lucky on our team that Chief Viverent, who's in the audience with us today, focuses on this area and has just provided invaluable technical assistance to the department. But frankly, we're also so lucky within the department that people like Paul Noel and Danny Murphy have spent so much time getting this area under control. And so let me start with the sexual assault side of things. This is perhaps the best example of police department community stakeholder partnerships and working with the Family Justice Center, working with Tulane and Loyola, and I know I'm going to mess up all the. I'm looking at someone. Help me with the names, right? People who care so much about this. The mayor, prior mayor, had a task force about this, and all that contributed to a major change. And the news media properly called this, and the IG himself properly called this a remarkable turnaround. So DOJ found major problems. After we started, more problems were discovered. There was another investigation by the IG and our team where we found more problems. This is a good place to remind everyone of something you might have read about in the past that really built up our faith that the department was serious about compliance. Because not that long ago, a couple of years ago, we found a lingering problem in the way patrol officers responded to these calls. And what NOPD did is NOPD leadership came to see the monitoring team and the judge right away. They didn't run from the problem. They admitted the problem. They came with an action plan to fix the problem, and they implemented that action plan right away. And our team doesn't just take that as a given. We then look to see if they lived up to their word, and they did. It's a great example of, rather than running away or hiding problems, embracing it as an opportunity to fix them. And so that's exactly what we saw happen here. There's a lot more detail in our report, and a couple of, maybe it was last year, we had a much broader report on this topic, which you can read and see a lot more detail. I really just want to highlight one thing. We had a court hearing on this topic, I think it was within the last 2 years, and some of the stakeholders came up and they talked about this slide as the most graphic illustration of what this improvement has meant to real people. Okay? When we first came to New Orleans, you would think that New Orleans was the safest city in the world for women because they had no domestic violence and no sexual assaults, according to the data. Obviously, that's not true. What we now see is because the department has built up a very credible investigations unit and very credible processes and procedures, women are reporting now. They do have faith in the police. This isn't an increase in sexual assault. This is an increase in the trust of the department in reporting sexual assault. And we know that because we can look at the numbers and match them up against other cities of similar size and similar crime rates. So we know why, we know what this means. And this is a very, very pleasing slide to everybody. Now, a similar story in the domestic violence side of things. Okay, we have seen excellent supervision here. We've seen excellent community partnerships, as I mentioned before, with stakeholders. We've seen a close working relationship between the police department and the DA's office. And in fact, at the community meeting in February, if people are interested, we can talk more about that and we can get into more of the details about some of these partnerships. We have looked at the policies, the training, the procedures, all best practices, and our audits confirm that this is all working. Importantly, the problem we found last year with patrol response, Chief Viverent has now looked back at that several times, and that's now fixed as well. So we're very, very proud of the accomplishments here. And here, once again, it's having a real impact on people's lives. People trust the department. They are reporting. NOPD is responding properly and changing people's lives. This is one of the areas where I think NOPD and most departments continue to struggle, is with response times generally. So last year, we looked very closely at this issue about response times and DV calls. To be clear, these are not DV calls where someone is in the process of being assaulted. These are typically DV calls where they call in, the department puts it on code 1, and it took the department a long time to get to those calls. Those findings are in our prior report. Now is through the department's corrective actions, we're now seeing the data go in exactly the right direction on these calls too. Chief Viverette monitors it for us, and she confirms the credibility of these data. Our team can stand behind these data. I don't think I get to tag team to you here, right? I think I get one more. Lucky me. Officer assistance and support. Officer assistance and support is an interesting one because I think at first glance, some members of the community might not think that this relates as directly to their lives on the street every day. What we have seen and what we have learned over the course of our monitoring is this very much relates to the community satisfaction, the community comfort, because this ties directly to how officers do their job. It's a very stressful job being a police officer. Stressed officers, tense officers are more likely to use force. They're more likely to make mistakes. They're more likely to put themselves at risk. When we came on board here, though, the department did not have any respectable program for their officers. I think it was a shame, okay? And I don't hesitate saying that. It was not fair to the officers. The first year or two, the department still didn't step up in this area. I think it was a shame. But then the department realized that, hey, this is a problem, and they worked together, and they got a program that everyone should be proud of. In our view, there's room for further growth. Officers deserve one of the best wellness programs around because of the stress and tension of the job. But they have put together a very credible program. They have an excellent director of the program in Ms. Thibault. They have policies that work. They have regular training. We see the feedback when we talk to officers, and the feedback is positive. We've watched the training. The training is effective. As I said, we'd like broader services available to officers. I think that's the best way to keep them and citizens safe. But what we're seeing is terrific. Now, to just illustrate a little bit of this, this is a survey that the department conducted. It's not our survey, but I'm willing to show it here because it is consistent with what we see when we talk to police officers. And what we're seeing is police officers who, as a rule, do not like to share their feelings and problems with others. Okay? Police officers are a very hold it close to the vest group of people, but they are, in fact, reaching out when they need to the Office of Officer Assistance, and they are referring friends when they need to. And the fact that they felt good about it and they're willing to do it again when necessary is excellent news. Now I'm tagging out to you.
You're tagging out to me. All right. Someone may have.
Yeah, thank you.
Secondary employment. This was clearly one of the most controversial areas under the consent decree. In the first year, we found that when we would ride along with officers and we spend hours in the car and we get a lot of candid feedback, the general sense, most officers acknowledge the need for reforms. They may not have been so happy with who was brought in to lead them, but generally there was a recognition of the need for reform, some small disagreements. But I will tell you, secondary employment was one of the areas that really engendered some of the most heated opposition, candidly. It was a long entrenched system, but the simple fact of the matter is, the Department of Justice found it undermined the chain of command. It led to corruption. It really just undermined the quality of services. So it wasn't the unregulated informal system just could not be allowed to remain in place if you're going to have a truly professional police department. Creating, however, a system for regulating secondary employment really was a unique challenge because it didn't just require changes in policies within NOPD or practices. It really required the city to create a new business unit that had to manage work, had to ensure people got paid, and it's really ultimately a customer service unit within City Hall. So it has to deal with both the officers who work secondary employment and can choose not to, and the people who hire NOPD officers for details. So it really was creating a small business unit within City Hall. Colonel John Salomon did a wonderful job putting those systems in place. So we have new policies and training. The office is up and running. There's been a successful transition to the new acting director, Fabian Beverin. We work closely, so it's working well. We're finding 100% compliance. The data keeping systems in OPSI are working well. There's been a decrease in violations, but the ones we find are referred over to the department, and there is appropriate discipline. So from where we started, where at least many officers said they weren't going to work in the new system, we are now seeing the success of this program. This chart shows the number of officers who are now working details, and it's grown steadily over time. As a result, other employers then had to increase pay rates to attract officers. So the end result of this project is not only that participation is at pre-consented pre-levels, but the pay rates are higher than they were. So I like that as an interesting observation about the effects of capitalism. We're seeing a steady decrease in violations, which we really should as an indicator that the system works and that we have buy-in and the officers know what's expected of them and they're complying with it. Misconduct, complaint intake, investigation, and adjudication. This was, along with use of force, in fact, this one was probably the biggest transformation in the department. The department had systems, but to be candid, they weren't consistently enforced. They allowed for a lot of favor. They didn't. Here are the total complaints. Really, the bottom line for this slide is that we're seeing an overall decrease in the number of complaints, which is a good thing. Interestingly, however, the ratio of public complaints to rank initiated, i.e. initiated by other NOPD personnel, is shifting, and now we're seeing more rank initiated complaints, which means that NOPD officers and supervisors are doing a better job at holding their people accountable to the policy. So that's exactly what we want to see. So this one is another success story, and we're impressed with the work that NOPD has put in to make it happen, and particularly with the consistent and strong leadership by Chief Westbrook.
Let's talk a little bit about the academy. This is another area where the transformation has been astounding. Even though there's more work to be done at the academy, we are so proud of what they've done, and a lot of people have contributed to this, including now Superintendent Ferguson, Deputy Chief Chris Goodley, and Dean, as I like to call her, Deidre McGee, who's here somewhere, who has really brought kind of an academic professionalism to the academy that, in my experience, few other academies across the country have. So let's talk a little bit about the work that's been done, the successes, and then a couple of areas that need a little more work. This is one of the scarier stories to tell, by the way, because when we started this project, the academy, I would say, is in tremendous disarray. When we came, we asked to see the lesson plans, and there were no lesson plans to give us. Okay? The city was teaching new police officers without lesson plans, without a curriculum that made any sense. The materials they were using were tremendously outdated and, frankly, in some cases, offensive. And so we really started near the bottom, and through the hard work of the people I mentioned and the instructors at the academy and the outside adjuncts that work at the academy, they've just come such a long way. All the lesson plans have been updated. The curriculum has been totally redone and resequenced. There are policies, there are standards, there are standard operating procedures. The instructor training has gotten better. I can't stress enough the forward-thinkingness of everyone who came up with the idea to have a real academician who's really in charge of moving the academy forward academically. We observe and monitor the courses. We find the courses getting better and better every time we monitor them, and the content critically is good content. The content tracks the policies and tracks the law. And we definitely need to give a shout out that the department has gone beyond what LA Post requires, certainly, and even goes beyond what the consent decree requires in terms of the number of hours that are given at the academy. This is, I don't expect anyone to be able to read this. But I did want to have, this is one page among many, many pages of this resequenced curriculum that the department, working closely with DOJ and the monitoring team, put together. This is what didn't exist at first. The concept that, oh, well, if we're teaching class X, maybe we should teach that before class Y. And gee, maybe that relates to class Z, and those have to come in a certain order. This is stuff that at a school like Loyola is done automatically. Everyone does this, but the academy didn't. Now, through this massive effort, they do this, and this is just, as I say, one page among many. This is just a quick snapshot of a slide showing that, yes, the right people are taking the right courses. When we started this slide did not look at all like this. So this just sums up what we're really finding. Our team has observed, I would probably say every instructor and every course. I say most because there might be one instructor teaching one course that we haven't got to yet, but we regularly monitor them, and we continue to be impressed with the progress all the instructors are making. Our audits show that, as I said, all the courses have the right content now. Now, the areas where we continue to work closely with the academy, and we're not getting any pushback from the academy. This is really a joint effort to just fix the pieces that need fixing. Is we have these concepts we call core concepts, things that go to the very heart of policing and the consent decree. Things like constitutional policing, procedural justice, peer intervention, and what we look for is to make sure that those concepts are really interwoven through all the classes. So if you're taking a class on use of force, the academy is building in these concepts of procedural justice and peer intervention. And when you're taking a class on driving, those concepts are flowing through that as well. So we continue to work to perfect that with the academy. And also, there is a right way to teach grown-ups, and it differs from the way one teaches kids. And scenario-based learning, adult learning techniques, things that Dr. McGee know far better than I, but those are critical to a great academy in this day and age. Dr. McGee has brought the department's academy very far on that front, still more work to do, and we're working together to bring them that last step. So with that, David and I do want to talk about the areas that require more work. So I'm just going to put these up here because we're really going to use the next page to talk about them. And I'll let David kick this one off.
The lead monitor gets the spoonful of sugar, the deputy gets the medicine. But this slide shows that despite the tremendous progress, there is still some really important work to do. A couple of general observations. We want to be clear, significant progress, not a negative finding. A lot of hard work has been done in all of these areas, and these are some of the most challenging areas because, as we'll talk about in just a minute, many of these areas really have to do with what officers and supervisors do every day over and over, and getting that right really necessarily follows after having right policies, training, and support systems. And then it's just a matter of doing the correctly consistent. Effective compliance is just a matter of continued diligent application of effort. So let's talk about the areas. I actually, on this one, I want to start with community engagement there on the far side. In some ways, it's a little different than some of the others. So we're actually very impressed with the progress the department has made to coming into compliance with the community policing sections of the consent decree. and to really developing a robust plan for community engagement. There's a community engagement plan, there's a manual. They have they're developing now community engagement scorecards. There are community policing signals. So they're really developing and are on the verge of implementing some tremendous tools that will really help the department shift into a true problem-oriented policing approach, which is really at the heart of community policing. So there's been they're doing a great job. This was one of the areas that began to get significant attention later in the process, so it's a little later coming into compliance, but we expect to have some very positive reports coming out about community engagement. I then want to talk about recruitment. I'm sorry, let me touch on the sort of quick bullets on community engagement. One of the areas that we worked hard with on the department, they were very receptive to our suggestions about geographic deployment, which the consent decree calls for, and our team of experts believes is really essential to effective community policing. So after a lot of work, the department has come up with a plan for geographic deployment of officers that we expect they'll be rolling out soon. We do find that a true problem-oriented approach to community policing has not yet been fully implemented, but it's moving in the right direction. Same with the community policing form and scorecards. We commend the department for the number of public meetings it has, district meetings. We find that the quality and value of those meetings is a little bit uneven, so we continue to improve the way it's using the max data. It's a tremendous database that will help the department shift to a problem-oriented policing approach, and will really help the public to understand and to see exactly what the department's doing. And I think it'll be a great device to bring the public and the department together. And it's still a work in progress, but it's going well. Recruitment, I think is a recruitment unit. We're not, the NOPD is still not attracting the sort of the quality or the quantity of recruits it really needs to grow to the levels of force it needs. The vetting, we've been very critical of that previously, and we've been a tremendous tool, but only if it's used correctly and consistently by the supervisors, and that is not yet happening. We will be focusing on roll call training. That's training that happens obviously at roll call, but it's the way we consistently update officers on new policies or procedures where we flag problems or trends. Those are addressed in roll call training. It's important that that be effective and it delivers the message in a way that is valuable to the officers, and we see room for improvement there. Similarly, I'm skipping around the slide, performance evaluations. That just flows from supervision. Nobody likes performance evaluations, we get that, but the simple fact of the matter is to create the next generation of leadership, to make sure that the NOPD standards of performance are being adhered to by all its personnel. Close supervision is essential, and we're really not seeing that. To be candid, we think that there are a number of supervisors who are not doing the job they need to do. Some are doing a terrific job, but that simple fact of the matter is they all have to do an excellent job. They all have to do it consistently, and so that's an area that will get a lot of our attention going forward. In stop searches and arrests, again, every officer has to know the right legal standards, has to apply it correctly, has to document it appropriately, and we see room for tremendous improvement there. We're not seeing blatantly unconstitutional stops, but what we are seeing is a lack of clarity as to the standards, some imprecisions or inaccuracies in the reasons given for a stop, and we can measure what the officer says by what we see on the body-worn camera. So it's an opportunity to see where there are problems, but also an opportunity to correct and instruct and to address that. We have seen some consent searches that are not always being approved by supervisors, and we see some need for additional training. But with respect to supervision, stop searches and arrests, and performance evaluations and promotions, certainly those are the areas that they're kind of lagging things. Once you set up the structures, the monitoring systems, the training, this is the stuff that happens every day and affects all members of the department. So it's not terribly surprising that it's later to come into compliance, and not terribly surprising that it's going to take a lot of work to change entrenched behaviors from a lot of people. So while we see tremendous need for improvement, I think we feel comfortable that we will see that improvement going forward.
So in 5 minutes or less, I'm going to round out our portion of this and then hand the clicker over to the police department. And then after that, we'll hand the clicker over to the United States, and then turn it back to Judge Morgan to bring it all home before 11. That's our goal here. So I want to step back for a second. David and I have walked through a lot of the details. Remember, our report is online. It's docketed in the court system. It's on our consentdecreemonitor.com website, and the police department either has it or will have it on its website. Also, these slides, the court will docket today, and these slides will be available on the court's website as well as our website. So you'll have all this. But I do want to step back just for 1 second and talk about what in many ways is one of the most impressive statements about the cultural change that we're seeing going on in the department. Because these are examples where the department has decided not to stop with compliant, but to strive toward professional. And these are really, really big deals that are worth an entire talk in themselves, but you're not going to get that here. So you're going to get a brief summary. The first one I want to hit is one that Judge Morgan already mentioned. It's one that I'm so proud of the department for. And as I read in the paper this morning, I apparently said on a few occasions that I will be the biggest thorn in the department's side when they're not doing well, and I will be their biggest cheerleader when they are. I was reminded of that in the newspaper this morning. That is a true statement, and this is one area where I am a cheerleader for the department. The men and women in the police department have created a peer intervention program like no other department in the country has. It actually teaches police officers how to safely and effectively intervene in another officer's conduct before mistakes and misconduct happen. I can say this isn't just a concept. I myself have seen this happen in the street. I've seen it save officers' careers. I've seen it save citizens. I've seen it prevent mistakes. And I've seen over the course of our years here the occasional failure of someone to intervene cost careers and cost citizens their safety. If anyone hasn't, or maybe none of you have seen it yet, but the Washington Post just carried a story 2 days ago about your EPIC program. It is now talked about at the FBI's training. Superintendent Harrison said he's bringing this to Baltimore. So if we think back to when we started this whole journey, to think, based on what we read in that DOJ report, that NOPD would be in a place where a program that the men and women of the department created is now being carried throughout the country, this is a major sign of impressive culture shift. So everyone, check out the articles on that. You'll hear more about Max from the department, so I won't steal their thunder, but it is an impressive management and data management tool that has, frankly, not only made NOPD's jobs easier, but has made our job easier. NOPD now makes more data available to the public than most any other department that I've seen, and we can stand behind those data. We check those data to make sure it's they are accurate and current and complete, and it is a very impressive thing to see data being shared publicly. We should say a word about the critical incident video release policy because it is so different from what you see in other cities. In other cities, you see when there's a police use of force, you see the city hold on to and hide that video from the public. Okay? We all have seen examples of this around the country. And then we see what happens after that, when the video is released a year or two later, right? That's not how NOPD does this here. And this is NOPD's doing. This is beyond what the consent decree says. They have created a process where when there is a critical use of force by an officer, they meet immediately. They talk about how quickly they can get that information out. They meet with the families. They meet with the media. They get the video's out. We saw it recently. We saw it a time before that. That is a major move forward in terms of transparency that we don't see, frankly, in many other cities and departments. Let me hit some of these other ones really quick. Just if people are interested, come to the public meeting in February. We can talk more about these, or ask any of the officers here. But NOPD is working on a fellowship program for their future leaders in conjunction with Loyola, where future leaders can come participate in the programs here at Loyola, to transform themselves into the future leaders of the department or wherever they go. Judge Morgan mentioned the partnership between NOPD and the Innocence Project. This, frankly, I think every department should do this, but interestingly, I know of no other department in the country that has been confident enough. People often think Innocence Project and police department should be at odds. They shouldn't. NOPD proved they shouldn't. I know we have a couple of Innocence Project people in the audience here, so thank you for all the great work you've done. And keep your eye on that program. We're going to see that continue. The Academy is now looking at ways to, beyond the recruit training and the in-service training, to come up kind of with electives for the leaders of the department by bringing in people from industry or bringing in people from other departments. And that's another way of thinking beyond what the consent decree says. Judge Morgan already talked about the work we're all doing to reduce the burden, because that directly leads to more officers on the street. And also, Judge Morgan mentioned, it's just worth hitting again, that unlike when we started this project, now NOPD are leaders in the conversation about reform across the country. I'm not saying NOPD leaders and we agree on everything or we don't have our fights, but the way they have stepped up and embraced their reform process and started exporting that to the world is very impressive. I talk to Paul Noel all the time, and he is he's either at the FBI or at IACP. It's that not only it helps the department, it helps the city, it helps the officers, and it helps the community. So just some examples of where we've seen the department go beyond. This summarizes why we think we have got here so fast. As David said, we're not done yet, but we are where we should expect to be. These things are complicated. Okay? Other cities have not got this far this fast. And this is the recipe for how we did that. Okay? You can all read it yourself, so I won't go through the whole thing. But as I said to start, it's because the department's committed, the city has been committed, the monitoring team has been committed, and frankly, David and I have to give more credit to our team. You see Ashley, Marianne, and Bob right there. We have other members of our team. They're the ones who do so much of this legwork here. And Judge Morgan, obviously, is probably the most intimately involved judge in a consent decree and has pushed not only the city and the United States, but the monitoring team to keep working harder and harder to transform your department into a great department. So obviously, the keys to continued progress and to getting to the end are the same things that brought us here. It's got to continue to spend time building the community trust. You can't do this without the community trust. Like, it doesn't work, right? Continue to focus on where we've been successful, and that formula is going to get us forward. Let me end then with this. Again, I'm not going to go through everyone. I think David and I have already hit this throughout the course, but this is what we need to do now. We need to keep the green in the green. We need to get the light green in the dark green, and we need to get the blue into the green. That's all doable. Okay? This is all within our collective abilities to do. But it's going to take all of us working together, and we're confident we can pull it off. So let me conclude, and I'll hand the clicker over. NOPD had a very slow start, but the progress in recent years has been remarkable. I probably said it too much already, but I promised I'd be the cheerleader when they deserved it. The leadership team deserves just tremendous recognition for what they've done so far. Our audits are showing that this is working, that it is achieving its desired outcomes, and it ultimately will achieve the desired end outcome. As David walked through, still work to be done, and that work is important. I don't want to belittle the work that still needs to be done. But just because there's work to be done shouldn't diminish the great stuff that has happened, and just because there's great stuff to happen shouldn't diminish the work to be done. So with that, I will hand the clicker over, I think, to superintendent or to city attorney. What slide do you want? So I'll give you this. And just so you don't have your background. Good?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to Loyola Law School for hosting us this morning. We are appreciative for the opportunity to share with you this morning. On behalf of the city, we'd like to confirm our commitment to constitutional policing, to ensuring continuous and sustained improvement in constitutional policing. We are so grateful to the men and women of NOPD who have worked so hard to accomplish and demonstrate all that Jonathan and David have shared with us this morning. I heard the term remarkable used a number of times, and I agree. To the men and women of NOPD, it is just an incredible honor to represent you and to represent the city of New Orleans. We believe in the reforms that have been accomplished. We are proud of the work that NOPD has done, and I assure you that Mayor Cantrell and the City Council collectively are so pleased with moving the department forward and building upon the accomplishments that have already been achieved. The City of New Orleans, our goal is and has always been a compliance determination. Based on the presentation this morning, I hope that you all will agree that the men and women of the department are working aggressively to ensure constitutional policing and are working aggressively to ensure that all aspects of the consent decree are met. We've heard and we are so proud of the work that the department has accomplished over and beyond what the consent decree has required. We acknowledge the work of all of those who have helped us to accomplish what has been accomplished thus far. Judge Morgan, thank you for the work that you have done in moving the department forward. Thank you for acknowledging the hard work of the men and women of the police department. We appreciate it and extend our thanks to you for what it is that you have invested in the city of New Orleans. We're also grateful to the monitoring team and to all of the stakeholders, both public and private, who have helped to elevate this department. We are so excited about where NOPD is, and we look forward to continuing the great work that is being done within the department, and most notably, NOPD is being looked to by other departments around the country for leadership and guidance in constitutional policing. This would suggest that NOPD is a model department, and we are so proud of the work that the department is doing currently. Chief Ferguson, thank you for your continuing commitment to build upon what Chief Harrison established previously. And we are grateful to Chief Harrison as well for what he contributed to NOPD. And we know that he will do great work in Baltimore in helping to elevate their police department as well. The city of New Orleans, Mayor Cantrell, and the City Council wholeheartedly support and reaffirm their commitment to sustained improvement in constitutional policing. We assure you of that. And without any further ado, at this time, I would like to bring up our new Chief of Police, Chief Sean Ferguson.
Good morning, all. First off, I would like to thank Loyola University for hosting us. Thank you, Judge Morgan, Consent Decree Monitors, Department of Justice, for inviting us this morning to participate in this meeting. I would like to also thank our Mayor Latoya Cantrell, the City Council members. I saw earlier Council Member at Large Jason Williams, as well as Helena Moreno, as well as Joe Jeruso. Just want to thank you all for your strong support throughout this process. Thank you for ensuring that we have the tools, the necessary tools and resources that are needed to provide and ensure our public safety, which is our #1 priority, especially to keep this momentum going forward. Well, I've only been the chief for just 1 week today, actually. I have been a part of this process from the very beginning as the commander of the 4th District, as well as the commander of the 2nd District, and most recently as the commander of the Education and Training Division, helping to shape the future of the New Orleans Police Department. I have witnessed firsthand how the consent decree has transformed our department as well as our citizens for the better of all of us. Now, I can say without a doubt I am proud of the men and women of the New Orleans Police Department and the work that they have done. And our successes thus far is a testament of their hard work and dedication throughout this process. However, we would not be here without their sacrifice, commitment, day in and day out to the department, to our citizens, and to our city. But make no doubt about it, there's still some important work to be done, and we are striving to do that work. The NOPD is the model of police reform, and departments across the nation and cities across the nation are looking to us for that reform and taking notes of what it is that we are doing. A true testament to what it is that we have done thus far is for Baltimore to take Chief Harrison from the New Orleans Police Department and saying, that is a testament in itself that we're doing the right thing right now. Inviting us to tell our story at IACP and major city chiefs, conferences, things of that nature, letting you know that New Orleans Police Department are doing the right thing. So now, as the chief of the New Orleans Police Department, I want to reassure you that we are committed, absolutely committed, to completing this circle. Not just complying with the consent decree in itself, but to sustain this throughout the process, beyond the process, and keep it going forward to continue to be this future, the leading, productive 21st century police department that we are. We will continue to move forward. We refuse, and we will not go backwards.